The pattern for many leaders is to be exalted in life and forgotten after death. The pattern for all who serve God, famous or obscure, respected or ignored, is that death is the door to glory. Her late Majesty famously declared on a 21st birthday broadcast that her whole life would be dedicated to serving the nation and Commonwealth. Rarely has such a promise been so well kept. Few leaders receive the outpouring of love that we have seen. Jesus, who in our reading does not tell his disciples how to follow, but who to follow, said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Her late Majesty's example was not set through her position or her ambition, but through whom she followed. I know His Majesty shares the same faith and hope in Jesus Christ as his mother, the same sense of service and duty. In 1953, the Queen began her coronation with silent prayer, just there, at the high altar. Her allegiance to God, her allegiance was given God before any person gave allegiance to her. Her service to so many people, her service to so many people, the Commonwealth and the world, the Commonwealth and the world had its foundation in her following God Himself. God Himself, who said that He came not to be served, to serve, and to give His life, and to give as a ransom for many, as a ransom for many people of loving service, are rare in any walk of life. Leaders of loving service, are still rarer. But in all cases, those who serve will be loved and remembered when those who cling to power and privileges are long forgotten. The grief of this day, felt not only by the late Queen's family, but all round the nation, the Commonwealth and the nation, arises from her abundant life and loving service, now gone from us. She was joyful, present to so many, touching a multitude of lives. And we pray today especially for all her family, grieving as every family at a funeral, including so many families round the world who have themselves lost someone recently. But in this family's case, doing so in the brightest spotlight. May God heal their sorrow. May the gap left in their lives be marked with memories of joy and life. Her late Majesty's broadcast during COVID lockdown ended with, "We will meet again." Words of hope from a song of Vera Lynn. Christian hope means certain expectation of something not yet seen. Christ rose from the dead and offers life to all, abundant life now and life with God in eternity. As the Christmas carol says, where meek souls will receive him, still the dear Christ enters in. We will all face the merciful judgment of God. We can all share the Queen's hope which in life and death inspired her servant leadership. Service in life, hope in death. All who follow the Queen's example and inspiration of trust and faith in God can with her say, "We will meet again."
thanks to God for Queen Elizabeth's loyalty to the faith she inherited through her baptism and confirmation, and affirmed at her coronation.
Eyes! Front! 37 half company. Slow! Arms!
Yeah, it's Westminster Abbey.
I'm on the procession.
You can see it? Great, cool. Alright. Thanks, bye. My friend Will.
I think this is what?
Or do you come to this at the very end? I've texted him.
Who, Martin?
Yeah. I don't think I've got the right number. It's just not even tweeted. About my shot at all. Hold on, right, I've got it, thank you. Windsor being massively. I do not want this at all. But this is really good. It's all silent.
it 2 minutes long?
procession begins its measured progress down the length of this part of the Abbey known as the choir, flanked on both sides by the congregation and the choristers. Ahead of the coffin bearers, who will follow shortly, the Virgin leads the procession, and behind him, the primatial crosses of Canterbury and York are held aloft. The 8 members of the Bear Party, 8 men from the Queen's Company, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, will move shortly into position to take up the Queen's coffin. It is followed by the King, the Queen's Consort, and their family. For now, the royal family stay in place. King Charles looks on in the south transept of the Abbey, seated close enough almost to reach out and touch his mother's coffin. Opposite the royal family, sitting on the front of the north transept of the Abbey, on the other side of the platform of the Queen's coffin, members of foreign royal families, and here on both sides the congregation is 25 rows deep. The Bear Party emerges from behind the places occupied by the royal family and take up their positions by a block of 3 linear right-handed arm, 4 to one side, 4 to the other. And gradually they slide the coffin off the couple. Very carefully taking the coffin of the Queen, first of all into their hands, and they stand for a moment in perfect stillness. And then gradually raise the coffin to shoulder height. In a moment, each man turns to 90 degrees and takes the weight of the coffin on his shoulder. Slowly, with perfectly coordinated steps, they will rotate the coffin of the Queen in a clockwise direction till it's facing west, and they can begin their progress through Westminster Abbey towards the Old North and into the nave. The Dean of Westminster standing immediately in front of the coffin. They begin to follow now. King Charles and the Queen Consort take their position immediately behind the coffin. They pass by between the stalls occupied by the choir of the Chapel Royal, St James's Palace, and the choir of Westminster Abbey. The children of the Chapel Royal, dressed in the bright red breeches and short coats, edged in gold and black, that were first worn during the reign of Charles II, and behind them the gentlemen of the Chapel Royal. All directed by James O'Donnell, organist and master of the choristers of Westminster Abbey. As the royal family follow their mother's coffin, King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla, the Princess Royal and her husband. It's worth pausing for a moment to reflect on what this must mean to those children taking part in the choir today, whose soaring descants did so much to endow this service with the solemnity and beauty that has characterized it. For many, it will be their first funeral. Surely the memory will stay with them for decades to come. They'll recall it 50, 60, 70 years from now. And as King Charles follows his mother's coffin, we're reminded that this is the ritualization of a key tenet of constitutional monarchy, that on the death of a monarch, the crown passes smoothly and immediately, in this case from mother to son. And so in a sense this was a moment in the sorrow that so much the nation feels in the loss of people as well. But tempered, that sorrow was tempered by the expectation of continuity. Placed very sparingly around the angle of clouds, delicately arranged in the quantity, Asiatic individuals, peoples of the open, stolen, flowers from there, all white flowers, all the brought to a green or down part of Malkia, set in their elegantly down green foliage, English folk green approach, many of course traditionally associated with them. Some some organs and people of them, they laughed, Samia, and the same time. Still some others in the Organ Centre. We can see the Organ Centre here at Presence African's Coronation in 1953, or to spiritual authority, etc. Presence of we lived in accordance with our Just again,
Mounted Police. The Mounties leading the way along to Wellington Arch, flanked by Mounted Metropolitan Police, followed by a contingent of those who've been recipients of the George Cross and Victoria Cross, and representatives of the armed forces of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and other Commonwealth countries. Gun carriage passing the gates of New Palace Yard and the Palace of Westminster and the Houses of Parliament, where of course Her Majesty attended on so many occasions for the state opening of Parliament. And all of this happening under the steady gaze of Sir Winston Churchill, dominating this part of Parliament Square, Queen's first Prime Minister, the young Queen, who expressed her debt of gratitude to the older man for the guidance that he gave in those first few years of the reign. which includes foliage chosen for its symbolism. The kings had a very big hand in this. Rosemary for remembrance. Myrtle, the ancient symbol of a happy marriage. And it was cut from a plant that was grown from a sprig of myrtle in the wedding bouquet of Princess Elizabeth to Prince Philip back in 1947. And English oak, which symbolises the strength of love. Along Whitehall, where the Queen once described her joy when she mingled with the crowds on VE Day in 1945, and where throughout her years as sovereign she led the nation in November on Remembrance Sunday, placing her wreath at the cenotaph and pausing to remember those lost in conflicts in the service of their country. Cenotaph, standards lowered by the Royal British Legion, King George's Fund for Sailors, the Soldiers' Charity, the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, the Soldiers, Sailors and Air Force Association. Solemnity as Her Majesty's coffin is taken past the cenotaph, unveiled by her grandfather George V in 1920. Some sense of the building scale of this funeral procession. The head of the procession now away down the Mall towards Buckingham Palace. The procession itself is 1.25 miles long. representatives here. The Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, and the Army. Hundreds of representatives with arms reversed as a sign of mourning. Queen Consort, the Princess of Wales, George and Charlotte in one of the cars following this procession. What a majestic sight. The sun has come out, making the colours so vibrant. On the Mall, looking up to Admiralty Arch. The scene, of course, every year of the happy event of the birthday parade, the Queen's parade on the official birthday. Today it's an opportunity to escort Her Majesty one last time along the Mall and past her London home at Buckingham Palace. His Majesty the King leading the party of close family members. Naval ratings gently turning towards the entrance to Horse Guards and the narrow archway which will lead onto the parade ground. A Royal Company of Archers, one of the groups of Royal Bodyguards. Horse Guards Arch, which is still officially classed as the main entrance to the estate, including St. James's Palace and Buckingham Palace. And on to the familiar expanse of Horse Guards Parade, where for decades Her Majesty has attended the birthday parade in early June to mark her official birthday. For many, many years, of course, she would come on horseback. In later times, in a carriage, but devoted to the event itself, and thoroughly enjoyed the music, with an expert eye for detail. And she knew the parade, trooping the colour, better than anyone. Golden orb surmounted by a cross to symbolize Christianity over the world. The scepter, the monarch's symbol of fairness and justice. Heading towards the Guards Memorial, and then gently turning to the right to head for the Mall, and that final approach to Buckingham Palace. Circling around the great Queen Victoria Memorial. The Royal Air Force there played such an important part, of course, in the events of the 8th of September and later, bringing the Queen back to London from Scotland. The Queen's body was accompanied by the Princess Royal. The Royal Air Force flew you, Her Majesty, back to RAF Northolt. A sight that the late Queen would have been very touched by. That is one of the drum horses. Drums draped in black. This one is called Apollo, one of the latest additions to the Royal Muse, and the state trumpeter. Major General commanding the Household Division, Major General Christopher Gicker, who was in charge of all the troops on parade today, thousands of them. The colourful uniforms of those in the procession behind the Major General. Sovereign's escort, Household Cavalry, the Blues and Royals. And we talked about the colourful uniforms. They are the pursuivants and the heralds and the kings of arms. They're in authority when it comes to heraldic matters. Saw them present at the Accession Council and at the state opening of Parliament and other important events to do with the state and the Crown. The scene at Buckingham Palace as this procession stretches now from Constitution Hill all the way back to Horse Guards. Representatives of the Army and the Royal Air Force and the Navy, the band of the Irish Guards and the Welsh Guards, this section of the parade. Funeral procession makes its way onto the Mall. Queen Consort, pointing out some of the elements of the procession to Prince George and Princess Charlotte, with the Princess of Wales looking on. And there we have the Duchess of Sussex and the Countess of Wessex. Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. And just at the back of this section, behind the King, we caught a glimpse there we are, of Duke of Sussex, the Princess Royal, and her husband, Vice Admiral Timothy Lawrence, Duke of York, Gloucester, Peter Phillips. So many memories, those taking part in this procession from the royal family. And there we are, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, who died 20 years ago, and King George VI, who died a relatively young man in his 50s. Back in 1952, of course, meaning that the Queen came to the throne at the age of 25. And no question that King George VI was responsible for shaping this remarkable reign that we've seen over the past 70 years. Because Queen Elizabeth II has reigned very much within the parameters set for her by her father. A very close bond between them, as indeed there was between the Queen and her mother. Great, rich mix of military heritage before our eyes. The Royal Marines, armed forces from the Commonwealth countries, the Household Cavalry, And among this part of the procession too, the heads of the armed forces. We spoke this morning to Admiral Tony Radican, who's head of all the armed forces, and his hope that this procession would be impeccable and a fitting tribute to Her late Majesty, and I don't think anyone would question that. Blues and Royals, followed by the drum horse and the state trumpeter, as they make their way gradually towards Wellington Arch and Hyde Park Corner. And there we have the Commonwealth Memorial Gates with the flames, as we see the procession making its way towards this part of central London, which is near the gardens of Buckingham Palace, and what is normally a very busy section of Hyde Park Corner. Today it's solemn and silent for this funeral procession for the late Queen. The Honourable Artillery Company approaching, part of the great representation of the British Army in this procession. Flanking the Queen's coffin, on either side we have the bearer party from the Queen's Company, 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, and with the distinctive white plumes, the gentlemen-at-arms behind them, equally distinctive in their Tudor uniform, the Yeomen of the Guard. Front of the band of the Scots Guards and Coldstream Guards, we have just about a view there of the Earl Marshal, gentleman in the glasses, the Earl Marshal, Duke of Norfolk, the man who's in charge of the organisation of state events, state funerals, coronations. It's a hereditary role. It's the 18th Duke of Norfolk. And he's the one who's shouldered a lot of the responsibility for making sure that this state funeral happens in accordance with Her late Majesty's wishes. In the centre, with the white plumes, we have the Major General commanding the Household Division, troops of the London District, Major General Christopher Geeker, who's in command of all the troops in procession today and elsewhere, lining the route and taking part not just in the procession itself. The great funeral marches, so familiar of course, by Mendelssohn and Beethoven and Chopin. This state gun carriage, which has been in the Navy's care since 1901, was first reserved for the funeral of Queen Victoria more than a century ago, and has been used since then. It was the same state gun carriage used for the funeral of King George VI 70 years ago. Regiments of foot guards, their distinctive tunics, Welsh, Irish, Scots and Grenadiers, and the Coldstream Guards. The Royal Lancers and the Royal Engineers also in the procession. This is the scene at Wellington Arch, which stands right in the middle of Hyde Park Corner. The ancient home of the Duke of Wellington nearby, and Wellington Arch named because of that connection. At one stage, the arch was planned as the main entrance to Buckingham Palace, but as with Marble Arch, things were changed at a later date. And this is where we will have a gathering of thousands of members of the armed forces for this final part of the ceremony in London, where the Queen's coffin will be transferred from that gun carriage to the state hearse, which will be waiting to take the Queen home to Windsor. Of Wales, standing tall, just behind his father, the King, and a section of these young naval ratings. The Yeomen of the Guard, an important part of this procession for reasons of tradition, and then the Royal Company of Archers with their magnificent eagle feathers, the King's bodyguard in Scotland. deeply poignant moment in this procession as Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II approaches Buckingham Palace for the last time. On this fine September day, with touches of blue at the sky, the London skyline looking glorious in the background. And here we have what is, for the late Queen, a last glimpse of that famous balcony where she appeared on so many occasions, where she stood with her father and mother, the King and Queen, at the end of the Second World War, cheered on by the vast crowds who were in the area we can see today. And the vast crowds again here when the young Queen was crowned back in 1953. Just ahead of the naval ratings were drawing the carriage. Very poignant moment for them because members of the Queen's household, including her private secretary, part of this procession, now passing Buckingham Palace, their place of work, of course, along with Windsor and other royal residences, but Buckingham Palace was always the office. And here we have the staff of the palace. Great line of them standing in silence and respect as they wait for this procession to pass with the late Queen. And we think here of the 4 memorable jubilees during the reign. We look at that balcony and all the delight and joy and celebration of those times. Memories, of course, shared by the royal family and all of the royal household in today's procession, and millions watching, wherever they're watching around the world, will remember those occasions with equal joy. look at the heart of the procession. We mentioned the royal bodyguards and the bearer party. Also there are the service equerries who have been part of the Queen's service. Leaving Buckingham Palace behind and slowly advancing towards Hyde Park Corner and that transfer in readiness for the journey to Windsor, a journey by road. Contrast to the events of 70 years ago, King George VI was taken in procession from Westminster Hall to Paddington Station. There was no service at Westminster Abbey. The service in full was at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. And King George made the journey from London to Windsor by train, on the Royal train. But arrangements this time are different, and the decision was made to take the Queen from London to Windsor by road in the state hearse. Procession passing just on the left there, the great gardens of Buckingham Palace, where so many of those garden parties took place over the years, thousands of them. With so many people being delighted to be asked, just once in most cases, to enjoy the gardens, and indeed, if they were fortunate, to have a few words with Her Majesty during the garden party itself. And then on the other side we have Green Park. Members of Her Majesty's household taking their part proudly in the procession. And still the sound of Big Ben tolling right across central London, punctuated with the sounds of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery firing their long gun salute. And they've been based principally at Hyde Park for this firing today during this procession. guns at Hyde Park. There are 2 guns also being fired at Hyde Park Corner, dismounted guns, as part of this last formal section of this procession today in London, before a separate procession takes place at Windsor later on. Lining the route in this part, Royal Air Force. Vice Chamberlain and the Treasurer of the Royal Household, part of this group representing those who served Her Majesty. Scene that will touch the hearts of everyone watching, I'm sure, as we look at the close family, children of the late Queen, led by the King, grandchildren, as they know full well that within minutes it will be the moment for the late Queen to leave London and to head back home to Windsor. London, of course, the city of the Queen's birth. And we are just a matter of a few yards away here from the Queen's childhood home on Piccadilly. And not too far either from her birthplace in Mayfair. magnificent view of Wellington Arch, with the greenery right in this busy part of London. And all the armed forces formed up for this final ceremony. Carriage will be taken under the arch, and from there the transfer to the state hearse will take place. So many elements of strong tradition worked into the procession today. A piping party from the Royal Navy will pipe the still when the transfer is about to happen from the gun carriage to the hearse. A piping party that we heard at the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral last year. A very strong echo of the Duke of Edinburgh's life at sea. And of course, from the Queen's point of view, a tribute to her late father, King George VI, and his experience during the First World War at the Battle of Jutland. A very challenging experience at sea. And of course the Duke of Edinburgh himself with his wartime service in the Second World War. Imperial state crown and the orb and sceptre will be part of the procession, and that royal standard which is draped over the Queen's coffin all the way to Windsor until that final committal takes place in St. George's Chapel. And when those emblems of Her Majesty's authority will be set on the altar at St. George's Chapel before the committal takes place. Under the arch they go. Her Majesty's coffin on that carriage to be sheltered under that arch. The transfer will take place.
uniongoze, bado nakuhitaji, uniongoze, Yesu kiongozi mwema.
Moments that few of us will ever forget, I'm sure. National anthem played as Her late Majesty was taken from Wellington Arch and is now on the way to Windsor after a very moving service at the Abbey and some clearly expressed messages, including those of the Archbishop of Canterbury, about the Queen's life of service and dedication and sense of duty. And then the magnificent, solemn, moving procession all the way from the Abbey to Wellington Arch. And there are crowds on the streets here approaching Knightsbridge, lots of them offering floral tributes, others just maintaining a dignified silence. Come to see their Queen for the last time as she leaves London. Katie Nicholl and Robert Hardman are still with me here in the studio looking at these scenes and have been watching the procession and the service before that. Katie, as we see the Queen's final departure from the capital, I suspect that these are the images that will stay with people for many years to come.
I don't think anyone that watched that, Hugh, will ever forget it. And you said during your commentary, so many memories, and that's what struck me as I watched that procession past those landmarks that have punctuated the Queen's life and punctuated ours, because we look forward to Trooping the Colour and those birthday parades. You know, I look at my life and it's been marked by the silver, the diamond, the gold, all these wonderful jubilees, and I can't help but think back to the Platinum Jubilee celebrations and the last time that the Queen stepped out on that balcony. And I think if anyone's wondering, what must she make of all of this? Remember when she stepped out for the last time, overwhelmed with emotion, that sea of faces, that sea of people there for her. Well, today they turned out again to bid a final farewell.
They did, Robert, and the sense of love and respect and admiration is just as strong as the sense of loss.
It is, Hugh. I thought it was rather touching. We saw just a few moments ago almost a ghost of a smile on the face of the King as he saw the end of this extraordinary ceremony, because it's been a spectacular and as we said earlier, unprecedented gathering of not just of world leaders but of all these armed forces from around the world. This is a ceremony unlike anything, really, as you said earlier, since the funeral of George VI, possibly since the coronation. And it's all gone exactly as the Queen would have wanted. She paid a great deal of attention to all of this, and she would have been so pleased to see it just go the way it's gone. And I think the wonderful contrast between the solemnity and the formalities we had a little earlier, and now just look at the capital coming out. I mean, they are 20, 30, 40, 50 deep in places, the whole of Hyde Park, and now this is the sort of the on her way to the other part of all of this, which will be, I think, rather more intimate.
Last night it was a glorious rainbow over London when we were preparing for today, and today it's a sunny day in September, and crowds really have come out in their many thousands, and the sunshine has added to the sense of colour and vibrancy. It's been solemn but not gloomy. This is the issue, because, as so many people have said, a life of 96 years is something to be celebrated. Of course, the Queen will be missed, but people understand that there's a lot here that needs to be said about everything that was achieved over that long lifetime. And that's really why I think that people have wanted to come out. It's a mark of thanks as well, not just of admiration. It's saying thank you as well as farewell.
It is, Hugh, and I suspect had it been pouring with rain, everyone that's standing out there today would still have done it in all weather.
It would be very British.
It would be terribly British, but I think the fact that as the coffin left the Abbey and the clouds parted and the sun came down, it was a wonderful moment to see that spectacle bathed in sunshine. And those rainbows that you point out, I think, struck so many people. The double rainbow over Buckingham Palace, the rainbow over Windsor Castle. I think we'll all be looking out for a rainbow later on today.
Indeed we will. And as you were saying, Robert, we're in a position where we are reflecting what's gone on today, but of course we're also looking ahead to the final part of this state funeral. And these people are clearly out to say goodbye and thank you for all you've done.
They are, and here we see Her late Majesty coming past the memorial to Prince Albert, that extraordinary memorial, 150 years old this year, the Albert Memorial, which Queen Victoria spent so much love on. I mean, it makes you think, what on earth are we going to put up to commemorate this extraordinary monarch who is leaving the capital for the last time? But you know, everything about today, there was a sort of timelessness to it. I thought you saw all the troops massing in front of Wellington's old house at Hyde Park Corner. It sort of could have been the 19th century. I mean, and yet we have all these sort of modern aspects to it. It's been a brilliant blend of ancient and modern today, and there is 21st century Britain saluting really one of the greats.
It's a wonderful parallel, isn't it, to be passing the Royal Albert Hall, because of course all those years that the Queen was determined to attend the Festival of Remembrance on Remembrance Weekend, the eve of the Remembrance service at the Cenotaph. The buzz among 5,000 people in that hall when she arrived at just before 7 o'clock on Saturday evening was remarkable, with people really feeling that the Queen's authority and the Queen's blessing on what was happening was indispensable. It wasn't the same event, and isn't the same event, won't be the same event without her, although of course the King will, and already has impressed lots of people with the way that he's
everyone wanted an imprimatur on these events. And wasn't it wonderful the way the procession took in almost all the great memorials, all the way through, not just the Cenotaph and the Women at War, but up to Hyde Park Corner. There's the New Zealand War Memorial, the Australian War Memorial. I mean, every aspect of shared sacrifice, I think, has been recognised today through this exemplary procession.
I was really struck as well, Katie, by the way in which the procession, the initial procession, which arrived at the Abbey in silence, a sense of expectation but deep respect. The service itself really did underline lots of the themes that Her Majesty wanted to have underlined. She was, of course, a woman of strong faith.
She was.
It had informed lots of the decisions that she'd made in her life and the way that she'd lived her life.
I think you're absolutely right, and we saw the faith reflected in that service with some of her favourite hymns.
Yes.
Readings that date back to the coronation. Everything had been so carefully considered and thought out and punctuated with the most important things in her life: her faith, the armed forces, her family, her people. It's all there, and I think also that sense that yes, we have lost something very, very special to all of us. This is a testimony to that. But in all of this, as Robert says, the tradition and the history and the landmarks and everything that's wrapped into this is the promise of the new. It's the continuity. We've seen that in the past 11 days, extraordinary days, and how the new king has been welcomed. But we saw that in the procession with Prince George and Princess Charlotte. That promise of the future, that promise of what's next to come. And I think that's reassuring, particularly at the moment
Yes.
The presence of Princess Charlotte there, a reminder of some of the extraordinary changes that the late Queen made during her reign. I mean, it was only in 2011 she changed hundreds, thousands of years of male primogeniture, so that, you know, the line of succession has changed. All these little, that's so much. I mean, when historians look back on this reign, they'll see so many small ways in which, very quietly but very firmly, she completely transformed this institution. And I also love the way today that the procession, it wasn't just about recognising her. I mean, obviously, clearly it was, but in her way, when she organised it, she wanted to recognise others. I thought the way in which she placed the Victoria Cross and the George Cross holders right at the front of that procession, for example, that was so her. You know, the George Cross, the great decoration invented by her father at the height of the war. You know, all these little things. There's a lot of nods, I think, to her parents in that.
And to the Commonwealth,
the
Mounties. I mean,
Mounties,
it was all there, down to the NHS workers and everyone that helped us through the pandemic.
Most recent recipients of the George Cross, of course, the NHS.
A last word then from us before we go to our colleagues at Windsor for the next phase of the day. And Katie, you first of all. It's impossible to start really assessing neatly and credibly this remarkable reign so early on. Distinguished authors, both. It's a challenge to do something like that. Do you feel that today will have helped people maybe turn the page, to just realise that great change is happening?
Yes.
And that they can take that on board? Is today the day when people will be helped in that direction?
I think so. I think this is the moment that completes 11 extraordinary days, and you could plan and rehearse and dress rehearse and do it all over again. You couldn't predict how the public were going to respond, what the mood would be. It's been phenomenal, but this is closure today, and I think back to what the Queen said in her very first broadcast when she was a little girl during the Blitz. All will be well, because it will.
Robert, is today the day when that happens? Because it's been 10 days of people really trying to come to terms with such a momentous change in public life and in personal lives.
I think what we've seen today, we have seen the embodiment of greatness from the world leaders gathered to what we're seeing now, an entire nation coming out. This is greatness in our time, and that greatness is really down to this extraordinary monarch, her life shaped by three people in particular: her father, her darling father, her beloved mother, and of course her beloved Philip. And I just think it is so powerful that here she is, she's on her way, and after all this grandeur and greatness, tonight she'll be reunited with them for eternity.
Well, we are looking at the progress of the procession of the State Hearse to Windsor, to the royal town of Windsor, where the final committal will take place a little later this afternoon, and our coverage continues. We will be following the journey, Queen's last journey out of London, to her home at Windsor Castle, and then we'll be following the new procession that will take place at Windsor, and of course the service at St George's Chapel. And as we look at the vehicles making their way, and the State Hearse in particular, you can see the bright colours of the Royal Standard and the crown and the orb and sceptre, telling everyone along the way that this is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, a Christian of conviction who, more than anyone, understood the message of the preacher, which is that there is a time and season to all things, a time to be born and a time to die. Queen understood that as part of the natural rhythm of life and the natural transition of the great constitution that she's upheld over many, many years. She's returning home to Windsor. Let's join Kirsty Young.
Yes, and so the grand and exquisite ceremonial tableau of that magnificent state occasion gently recedes into the background as the Queen's coffin makes its way now through London and out towards Windsor. Welcome to the splendour of Windsor Castle, the near 1,000-year-old home of royalty and the backdrop to many great battles and grand banquets. But today, sees maybe its most momentous event, the burial of our longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen will this afternoon finally be laid to rest in St. George's Chapel alongside her beloved parents, sister and husband. So many days of grand public ceremony will come to an intimate ending as Her Majesty passes into history. We'll see the Queen's coffin making its journey towards Windsor and the committal service, which will be attended by the King, the rest of the royal family, and also Her Majesty's closest friends. Windsor Castle is certainly exquisitely grand and imposing, but it's also a place where the Queen, well then of course a little princess, played as a toddler on the lawn, found safety as a teenager during the Blitz, rode her ponies, nursed her children, walked her dogs. Having left her cherished home in the Scottish Highlands 11 days ago, today she will come to rest for eternity in the home that was so important it gave name to her family. Well, the town of Windsor is, of course, a major tourist destination. It's used to crowds, but today its streets have taken on a unique character. The grounds of the chapel and the edges of the long walk are carpeted with bouquets of flowers. And the thousands of visitors, some local and many more from far-flung corners of the globe, are quietly positioning themselves to take one last look at Her Majesty's coffin. David Dimbleby will be taking us through this afternoon's event.
I suppose the way to see this afternoon's service is that if what happened at Westminster Abbey was the grandeur of a state funeral with heads of state, with people from all over the world coming to pay tribute to Her late Majesty, what is going to happen here at Windsor this afternoon is much closer to a family funeral. As Kirsty was saying, the Queen is going to be interred here along with the Queen Mother, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, Princess Margaret, and will lie with 10 other sovereigns going way back to Henry VI in 1471. So it is in that sense the sovereign coming back to the place where our sovereigns, or many of our sovereigns, lie. But on the other hand, the congregation is going to be very different here, as the people sitting here now are perfectly obvious were not in Westminster Abbey. They've assembled here, and they are a different kind of congregation, much smaller. They include, for instance, many of the Queen's godchildren. They include large numbers of people who worked on the Queen's estates, whether in Scotland or in Norfolk or in London. Some of them wearing, you see that little medal, the Royal Victorian Order, which several people here are wearing, and that's the order that's in the personal gift of the Queen, only given to people who have worked for her, and it's her decision whether they should have it. So what we'll see here is a quite different service, but with this momentous ending to it, which Hugh was talking about earlier on, the moment when the instruments of monarchy that were presented to her in Westminster Abbey at the coronation are removed from the top of the coffin and returned to those 3 cushions you can just see in the far distance on the altar of St. George's Chapel. The banners, of course, here are of the Royal Order of the Garter, hanging splendidly all the way down. The Garter Knights, who each have to provide the banner, there are 24 of them in all, and members of the royal family as well. So this chapel not only serves the purpose of being the Chapel of Windsor, but also of the Order of the Garter, founded in 1348.